So, for our listeners, I think anybody who is listening probably already knows this. So, we're both like Trevor and I are both engineers, work in software and all that stuff. And so they published an article on the New York Times, and I'm a subscriber. Like Trevor mentioned earlier, like I lean more towards the liberal side of the world. But so they had an article called "Tech as in Technology, Tech's Damaging Myth of the Loner Genius Nerd." So there's some bits and pieces I think, if our listeners should read this, and I guess pause right now, read this article, and then come back and listen to what we have to say. But one of the things that really struck me was towards the end of the article, there was a quote from, so they also obviously got their own sources, some other people had their own things to say and all that stuff. But so the second to last paragraph says, "The nerd identity is really damaging to women, but it's also damaging to minorities and to a lot of men who don't want to subsume their identity in that." And I actually found that pretty offensive. Because
what the fuck does that mean?
Well, yeah, not only is it meaningless and stupid, I think it's kind of offensive because what it's saying is people who have... So, there's like a nerd stereotype, right?
You can't be a nerd if you have a vagina? Is that the
it's
implication?
Offensive. It's literally saying that women can't be nerds because apparently you have to be a man to be a nerd. That doesn't make any sense. That's like anti-engineering, anti-intellectual. It makes me so mad to read stuff like that.
Let me think of what comes to mind when I think of nerds. I think of D&D, I think of video games, I think of comic books, I think of like programming, I think of nerdy shit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, like historically at least, and I don't think this is going to stay the way forever, but those things have been male dominated, but they've never been exclusive to women. If anything, nerds are like, oh my god, there's a girl here? Like, how can we, let me teach her everything that I know in my life. Like that, I don't get I just don't see where this is coming from. And it's stuff like that. It just kind of makes me mad. So
on the other hand, keep in mind, I think the people writing these articles by and large don't have perspective.
Oh yeah, they don't know what they're talking about.
Generally, they tend to be journalists, which for better or worse, right? They live in their own sort of bubble. They don't live in technology. They're not fucking. How many of their friends are nerds?
Right.
And they're complaining about a nerd problem in an area where everyone's a nerd, basically.
Right. I mean, what they're. Yeah, anyway.
My team is 50-50 men and women, and the women are just as nerdy as the men. I don't there's no point to be made here.
Yeah. So here's another quote from the article, and this kind of riled me up in addition, and it's also towards the end of the article, but it says, "When engineers build products with empathy, it can seem like magic. Technology seems to predict what people want before they know they want it. That was part of Steve Jobs' genius. Just look at the number of people connected to their phones, or a child using an iPhone for the first time." You gotta be shitting me. Like, it's basically what that's saying is that, the teams that built the iPhones, like, it's like somehow they were all like non-nerds, they were all like women, minorities, and like nobody there was a nerd. Are you kidding me? Like, have you ever tried to write code in Objective-C and you're gonna tell me that somebody who's not a nerd is gonna sit down there and do that? No way. These people have no idea what they're talking about, and it drives me crazy. It's like, so when you talk about like Steve Jobs' genius, and I'm using air quotes here, they just made a good product. They didn't care. There's no mindset where they say, well, we need to make sure we have X amount of women and X amount of white guys and X amount of minorities and X amount of whatever to make sure that this product appeals to everybody. They just sat down and made a damn good product, and they didn't care what was between your legs or what your skin color was. And what drives me crazy
is their
is
target audience was like
everybody. Yeah, exactly. So when you say, when engineers build products with empathy, what you're trying to say is that nerds can't, and then later when you talk about like nerds, you say that nerds can't build products with empathy, and then you're using the iPhone as an example, but the iPhone is built by nerds. Like, there's no casual person can sit there and design hardware or design the software that runs something like the iPhone. And it just makes me mad because I think it's dismissive of people who spend a lot of time and a lot of energy and most of their childhood, really. Like, guys like Bill Gates, who are like when you think of nerd, like, that might be a person you think of. Like, he started programming when he was like 10 years old, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a nerd. Like, that's what being a nerd is.
I'm in the same category. I started when I was like 12.
Yeah, I mean, when I was little, like I was always fascinated with computers. Like I wanted to, build them and do stuff like that. And like you spend all these hours learning all these skills, living, and sometimes, like a nerd lifestyle, using air quotes here, is a little bit more socially isolated because what you're doing is inherently not that social most of the time. So what you're doing here with articles like this is you're dismissing all the hard work, all the hours, all the intelligence, and everything that goes into learning how to do that kind of stuff, and you're just saying, well, anybody can do it, and people don't need to be like that in order to do it. And it's arrogant, it's anti-intellectual. To me it betrays. So to me that says you just don't know what you're talking about, and I think it's offensive. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not offended by much. I just think.
Well, I mean, I'm not like, I don't sit around and like, I don't. It's not like microaggressing me, but
at the end of the day,
you can't even say that without laughing. But
laughing,
yeah.
At the end of the day, I think the author is ignorant and wrong. That's it. That's all there is to it. The author lives in their own little bubble, and they're projecting.
Yeah. So there's another point of it, and it says one example, and I'm sure you're already like, you're just gonna be like, yeah, of course. One example is a distinction between front-end engineers who build the parts of a product that users interact with, and back-end engineers who work on behind-the-scenes systems like data storage or scaling. And I'm like trying not to laugh while I say this because it's so stupid. There's a bias that front-end engineering, which generally pays less and has more women, is less technically difficult. People who have done both say the skills are different but equally challenging and valuable. Like, okay. I mean, front end, depending on, it just depends on what you want to do. Like somebody who's more of a nerd, and I'm again using air quotes here, they probably grew up and like spent more time doing the back end stuff because that's just what their interests are. I mean, who cares like who does what? Like what? I mean, a lot of people are obviously going to be more interested in like the visual side of things, right? Like everybody is like cares about, like if you pull up the Airbnb app, you don't think like, wow, I wonder like how they scale that app. Like I wonder, if they're using, I don't know, Cassandra as a backend, or I wonder if they're using Hadoop. Like you don't think about that kind of stuff. You think, oh wow, this is a great interface. If you have a multitude of people, everybody's looking at that front end. Like of course there are going to be more people who want to do that job, and there will be more people who so there's just going to be like, you have more people, so you can just pay them less. I mean, it's not because they're women. Like that doesn't have anything to do with it.
So first of all, my big problem is they're conflating designers and developers. They're grouping front end developers and front end designers together,
right? Which are totally different things.
And this is why there are more women, because it's not even that there are necessarily more front end developers who are women. There might be. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case, because they tend to be younger. Front end designer or developers tend to be younger. But designers, that's a completely different field. That's art.
Exactly.
That's putting colors together. That's doing like, saturation, balance, that kind of shit.
Exactly.
That's taking.
You're coming up with icons, like you're coming up with scripts, like not scripts, fonts, like font type, like all that kind of stuff.
It's completely different work.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this: doing design work is A, less nerdy, and B, easier. Like just flat out. I have no problem saying that.
I mean, I certainly think it's less nerdy. I don't know if I'd say it's. I think it's not real. It's an apples and oranges thing because like I can't design anything.
I mean, it's a completely different skill set. That is definitely the case. But this conflating like design and development is insane.
Yeah.
Like, we're not talking about the same things. We're no longer talking about programmers. We're no longer talking about the field where women are over or underrepresented, right? That's not the case in design. You go look at, like, a graphic design class, and you're going... I mean, if you're surprised by the fact that, more than half the people in there are women, then I don't know what to tell you. You don't understand the difference.
Right, exactly. And that, so that was the... I guess the whole point of the article is, like, they're basically, like, damning people who... spend a lot of time, learning how to, like how many front end developers, as they're called, or designers, whatever, how many of them want to spend time learning like, how to assign variables and memory addresses or, whatever randoms kind of stuff. Like they don't care about that. They just want to make they want to make good looking products that people use, and that's good and that's fine. But I just got really annoyed at that article because they're basically saying that people like me and you perhaps too. Like, I spent my whole childhood screwing around with computers, building computers and putting parts together and like doing all that kind of stuff. And then you're sitting here telling me that, well, you know, you're being exclusive to women and minorities. And it's like, no, I'm not. Like, just because I want to sit in, you know, as a kid, I wanted to sit in my room and like play with computers doesn't mean I'm racist and sexist. It's stupid. And it just makes me mad that, because like I read the New York Times and like I try to avoid those articles because I know that it makes me mad because it's so inaccurate and completely wrong. But, you know, every once in a while they creep up, and I think it's relevant to the podcast. So. Yeah. At least the tech part of it.
Yeah, I want to wrap this topic up, but I do just last words I want to say for the third time. I think the author is just ignorant and doesn't understand the field and is not from it, right? The designer-developer mistake is, I mean...
It's like a noob mistake.
Well,
that's a nerd word, a noob. Yeah, so it's a noob mistake. Anybody who plays video games,
right? They just over and over in the article, I think, signaled their ignorance.
Yeah.